If you were hosting a late-night talk show that was suddenly interrupted by a surprise guest appearance from a bloodthirsty demon, what would you do? This up-and-coming funny man is willing to do whatever it takes to reach the top, but he's about to learn the hard way that when you make a deal with the devil for fame and fortune, the last laugh is always on you. We're here to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the demonic interview in Late Night with the Devil. This man is about to have the biggest night of his career, but what he doesn't realize is that it's also going to be his last. Our story takes us all the way back to the 1970s, a borderline prehistoric time when people actually watched cable TV instead of doom scrolling on their phones and binging the latest direct-to-streaming Netflix series. For many Americans, their only escape from the horrors of everyday life are late-night talk shows, where they can laugh their troubles away from the comfort of their living rooms. Jack Delroy, a beloved radio personality from Chicago, enters the scene as the host of the new talk show Night Owls. The talk show takes off as a big hit with the viewers, and Jack eventually accepts a lucrative 5-year contract with the head of the UBC. But he's constantly chasing that #1 spot, always trapped just a little behind the more popular hosts. Throughout the pressure, Jack's wife, Maddie, a famous actress, is always there to support him, but there's another side to Jack's life that he'd rather keep secret. Going as far back as his radio days, there have been rumors that Jack belongs to a group called The Grove, a mysterious organization of powerful men who meet in secret somewhere out in the California redwoods to perform dark rituals for fame and fortune beyond their wildest dreams. At the height of Jack's career, his world was sent into a tailspin when Maddie was diagnosed with terminal cancer. As the disease worsened, she made a surprise guest appearance on Jack's show. It was their most viewed episode ever, but still came up short of the top spot. And 2 weeks later, Maddie tragically passed away. Heartbroken, Jack disappeared from television for a month, until one night when he made his triumphant return to the show. Still, nothing he tried seemed to work. So, on Halloween night, Jack planned an episode that he hoped would finally turn things around, never suspecting that it would be the last show that he would ever film. Okay, this guy is willing to do anything for the top spot. It won't be long before he realizes that he's made a huge mistake. But first, let's take a second to break down how we ended up here. Around the start of the 1950s, variety-style talk shows moved from the radio to the center of the American living room, along with the rising popularity of the home television set. The combination of topical humor, a witty, charismatic host, celebrity interviews, comedy sketches, and musical performances seemed to resonate with American audiences, landing these shows the coveted primetime slot. Every night from the hours of around 7 to 11 p.m., Americans looking to unwind from a long day's work tuned in to watch their favorite host crack a few jokes, while television networks made a killing from the extremely valuable advertising opportunities. The fact that I just had to explain all that to you guys just shows how old I really am. What the f***? But the television wasn't the only thing on the rise in the early 70s. Besides the ongoing conflicts around the world and growing civil unrest, the decade marked a steep rise in the interest and fear of the occult. These sensational groups made for great news stories, which kept a general fear of the occult at the forefront of public attention. But the fear of forbidden offerings to dark entities in exchange for worldly gains wasn't only limited to openly fiendish groups. That's where Jack comes in, and more importantly, his connections to the secret organization called The Grove. As a physical location, the Grove is a real-life 300,000-acre campground located among the redwoods of Northern California. Each summer, it's home to a 2-week-long retreat for some of the most powerful and influential men from all around the world. The club is basically a men-only, invite-only, extremely high-security sausage fest, where these prominent figures gather to unwind and exchange ideas somewhere out of the public view. But many people believe that there's more to the story than what they're willing to tell us. And although they would never tell you themselves, it's been suspected that the nightly activities may involve a fair bit of dabbling in the dark dark arts. We're talking ritualistic ceremonies in front of 40-foot-tall owl statues. It's weird. It's weird. Anyway, the Grove uses an owl as their mascot, and throughout Jack's show, we'll see owl imagery plastered all over the set, even in the show's name, Night Owls. This could be intended as a constant reminder of exactly who Jack owes his rise to fame to. Even the station's motto, "Let's shake on it," seems innocent enough on its own, but takes on a whole new meaning when you understand the people who Jack became involved with in his quest for popularity. Throughout the history of late-night television, household names like Jay Leno, David Letterman, and Conan O'Brien have all experienced ratings scares at some point in their careers, but managed to bounce back by reworking aspects of their show to keep the audience interested. Only one person can be number one, and a lot of that comes down to circumstances beyond anyone's control. So instead of making deals with the devil, it's probably just safer to be satisfied with the success that you've been able to find on your own. Jack probably has his suspicions about what happened with his wife, but tonight he's going to find out that these dark forces are very real, and they never forget to collect on their debts. Jack's co-host Gus opens the show by introducing the night's guests: a medium, a magician, a parapsychologist, and a young girl named Lily, who's the subject of the Doctor's new book, Conversations with the Devil. After getting the audience warmed up with some topical jokes about sports and politics, Jack admits that he's feeling a little bit nervous, as tonight marks the start of Sweeps Week, where the show's ratings are going to be measured to see if he still deserves the valuable midnight time slot and the advertising opportunities that come with it. Still, he says that his real motivation for putting on a good show is to give back to his audience for supporting him through all of the tough times. But as we're about to see, that's not completely true, and Jack introduces the segment by explaining that there's been a growing interest in paranormal phenomena all over the country, saying that the audience should keep an open mind about what comes next. They open the doors from the backstage, and out comes a psychic, Christo, a large craniumed man in a fancy gold jacket who claims to be able to contact the spirits of the dead. The man starts receiving signals, reaching out into the crowd for anyone who might have some association with the letter P. He tries names like Peter, Pete, Peterson, until one guy finally speaks up that his wife's maiden name was Peter Mann. But she's not dead. She left him several years ago after having an affair with his neighbor. Christo keeps trying to get somewhere with this dude without having any success, and as the audience begins to treat his whole performance like a comedy act, he decides that he better regroup and get another spirit on the line, adding that he's only a messenger and sometimes things get lost in translation. Now Christo makes a beeline for two women conveniently sitting in the front row, and without much effort manages to guess that they're the mother and older sister of a boy named Edmund. Somehow, he's able to correctly guess that Edmund tragically passed away without leaving them much closure, and he tells the women that Edmund wants to apologize for what happened, saying that he still loves them both very much. It's a heartwarming moment, and Christo manages to win the audience back over to his side. But just before cutting to commercial break, something incredibly strange happens. The man suddenly becomes overtaken with an intense pain, causing him to scream out the name Minnie as his eyes begin to roll back in his head. He shouts something about an unmarried man with a wedding ring, begging them to step forward as the power in the studio surges and briefly goes out. The spirit finally leaves, and Christo picks himself up off of the ground, but he and the audience are clearly shaken up, so they decide to cut to a commercial break. Okay, well, that definitely took an unexpected turn right there at the end. Although mediumship has been practiced by cultures from all around the world, it saw a major resurgence here in the United States during the mid-1800s, along with the rise of the spiritualism movement. Many people genuinely believe that these mediums possess a unique ability to somehow act as a conduit between the living and the spirit world, and are able to find closure and guidance from making use of their service. But as of now, there exists no concrete evidence that confirm these powers are real. From a skeptic's perspective, they believe that what mediums are really doing is using a combination of clever tricks similar to those used by magicians to essentially put on a good show. One of these techniques techniques, called cold reading, is most likely what Christo was using here. Cold reading starts by observing the audience and making educated assumptions about their backgrounds. Next, the medium starts throwing out vague statements, like listing off last names that start with the letter P, until they're finally able to lock onto an individual in the crowd. The medium then continues fishing for information without appearing to ask a direct question, and lets the confirmation bias of the audience members take over, making it seem as if they've really done something, when, in reality, they're only playing a spooky game of 20 questions. We can see how this backfired on Christo during his first reading, and when he was forced to turn to the two women planted in the front row, who he'd clearly been told about ahead of time to win back the audience's trust. Now, if Christo here was really the professional that he claimed to be, then you'd expect him to know that conjuring spirits can be incredibly dangerous. The thing is, you can't always know exactly who you're really contacting, and could easily end up inviting the wrong spirit in. To me, it definitely seems like Christo is at least a little bit full of crap. But there might be a few signs that he actually may have succeeded in conjuring something by accident. There were several points during the segment where the film glitched out, and it's possible that contact with spirits caused some electromagnetic interference. At one moment while Christo was interviewing the two women, a ghost clearly appeared on the tape standing just to Jack's right. And another glitch happened just before Christo started to freak out. They'd be hard to catch by the producers who are watching the show, but from the looks of things, it seems like Christo actually did conjure a real spirit. And since I'm pretty sure that he's a fraud, that's probably not a good thing. The pain that he felt might have been the spirit momentarily possessing him, since he technically opened the doors and let it in. Obviously, Jack and the others here in the studio have no idea what's just happened, and besides those hardly noticeable glitches in the film, there's nothing right now to even indicate that they've made contact with a dangerous spirit, unless they already believe that it's possible. Then the next steps would be to immediately stop the show, make it clear to any spirits who are around that you're no longer open to surprise visitors, and then seek help from the expert of your choice. As it stands though, Jack only knows that they're putting on a good show, and things are about to get a whole lot crazier before they realize what they've actually done. Backstage, Gus tries to pull Jack aside and ask him some questions about one of the upcoming acts. Some of the crew couldn't help but notice that sacrificial dagger, but Jack's pushy producer, Leo, quickly chases him away. Leo tells him that there are two high-ranking executives from the network watching in the front row. With the commercial break about to end, Jack takes a seat back on stage. The show's makeup artist comes to clean them up, but Christo, who's been staring off blankly into the distance the whole time, violently grabs her arm and tells her to stop. Before getting started, Jack warns him that the next guest is going to play the role of the devil's advocate. The cameras cut back on, and after welcoming the audience back, Jack introduces the next act. Carmichael Haig, a former magician who's since become one of the top minds behind scientific skepticism. The man casually strolls up onto the stage and impresses the audience with a few sleight-of-hand tricks. But the point of this is to demonstrate that you can't always believe what you see. Jack explains Carmichael's background as a paranormal investigator, and the man says that he does it to expose the ones like Christo, who try to cheat people out of their money. He even walks around with a $100,000 check in his pocket for anyone who can prove that paranormal phenomena are real, a check that he never really expects to actually give away. An argument quickly breaks out between the two guests, with Carmichael insinuating that the other is a fraud, and Christo insisting that his abilities are real. Furious, Christo throws water in the man's face and tries to storm off of the stage, but Jack stops him, saying that he wants to talk about the last spirit who tried to come through, someone named Minnie. Standing up, Jack confesses that Minnie was actually a nickname of his deceased wife, and reveals that he is the unmarried man wearing a wedding ring. All of a sudden, Christo collapses to the floor and starts projectile vomiting tons of black slime all over Carmichael and the cameras, forcing Jack to quickly cut to another commercial break. Okay, that was special. Was he acting, or is there something much more sinister at play here? Let's start with the evidence to support that Christo was a fraud all along. For starters, there were plenty of chances where Christo could have seen that Jack still wears his wedding ring. And since he's such a big celebrity, what happened to Jack's wife is more or less common knowledge. As for his wife's nickname, that could have easily been a lucky guess, something that he found out from someone else ahead of time. Or Jack himself could have set this whole thing up to boost their ratings. With that being said, there were also signs that Christo may not have been faking it after all. He suddenly developed a bad cough right after conjuring Maddie's spirit, which would match up with her diagnosis, and even seemed surprised himself at how powerful the feeling of the spirit's presence had been, almost as if he'd done this hundreds of times before. But this was the first time that anything real has actually happened. Then we have the black vomit that he just yacked up all over the studio. If we're going with the theory that he's been possessed, then that's a sure sign that our buddy Christo here has a certified demon inside him. But there are also other ways to explain it. Google says that it could also be a sign of internal bleeding, which means that Christo needs to get to a doctor before he ends up on the other end of the spirit phone, if you know what I'm saying. Later, Carmichael mentions that this could have just been another trick from his act, but putting on that kind of performance would have been a challenge even for Christo. If you ask me, Jack's next guests need to either be Scooby-Doo or the Ghostbusters, before anyone else starts puking up demon slime all over the studio. The most frustrating aspect of all is that Jack and the others still have almost no reason to suspect that they're actually in the presence of a dangerous spirit. I'd say that it's time to pump the brakes on any more spirit conjuring for tonight, and to keep things a little bit more low-key for the rest of the evening. But Jack's quest to reach the top means that he can hardly think about anything else. And that's going to have some major consequences when we see what they're about to do next. While Gus distracts the audience, the producers rush Christo off stage and start scrambling to get the place cleaned up. The show starts back up again, and to introduce the next act, Jack recalls a story of how he recently discovered a book that he hasn't been able to get out of his head since he started reading it. Conversations with the Devil by Dr. June Russ Mitchell. Dr. June appears first, with Lily, a young orphan who was rescued from a cult, quickly walking right past Jack and taking center stage as she looks directly into the camera with an uncanny smile. When Jack shakes her hand, he quickly notices that the girl has a surprisingly strong grip, and when she takes her seat, she continues speaking directly into the camera, almost as if she's looking straight at the audience through their TV screens. Chuckling, Jack reminds her that they can speak to each other like a normal conversation, and starts the interview off by asking Lily if she's ever seen his show. The girl says that she hasn't, but quickly adds that she does know Jack. In particular, she knows that his wife recently passed away from cancer, and expresses how sorry she is for his loss. She also knows that he's worried about the show's ratings, but reassures Jack that he'll be very famous soon. During the break, another strange event catches Jack's attention. As the makeup artist comes to touch everyone up, the girl asks if she already looks pretty, in a voice that's unnaturally similar to his late wife's. Before he can react, Dr. June quickly pulls Jack backstage, saying that she's starting to get worried. The girl seems to be becoming more and more unpredictable, to the point where yesterday she slipped into a dissociative state and started saying Jack's name as if she was trying to remember something, which the doctor says that she can't explain. She's starting to have second thoughts about the production, but Jack insists that they need to keep going. And that's when Leo shows up to interrupt the conversation. He says that he just received a call from the hospital. Christo is dead, having experienced some sort of internal hemorrhage in the ambulance. Jack is completely shocked, but with the commercials about to end, he's forced to put it out of his mind and get back to work. Meanwhile, Carmichael the Skeptic finds out from the two women in the audience that they were given a survey and asked questions about their personal lives from a producer before the show started, further proving his point that Christo was really a fraud all along. Jack welcomes the audience back and begins to ask June about her professional background, but she's feeling highly on edge after their last conversation, and immediately gets into an argument with the Skeptic over the legitimacy of her work. She's able to shut the man down and get back to the conversation, where she explains that she genuinely believes that Lily is possessed by a demonic spirit, adding that these demons are stronger if they can keep their victims confused as to their true identity. As for Lily, she's taken to calling the entity entity Mr. Wriggles and choosing this name for the way that he seems to wriggle around inside of her head. Suddenly, the studio's theremin device begins going crazy even though no one's playing it. And when Gus reaches over to shut it down, he's immediately hit with a powerful electric shock. The noise grows louder and more intense until the glasses on the table in front of them suddenly start to explode. But Carmichael fixes things by simply unplugging the instrument, explaining that it must have been feedback from the studio's PA system. It's a good explanation, but Lily insists that this was no production mistake. According to the girl, her friend Mr. Wriggles is among them right now. And, seeing an opportunity for some incredible TV, Jack asks the girl if they can bring the demon himself onto the show as a guest. June says that it's a bad idea, but after getting some serious pressure from Jack, the audience, and even the Skeptic, she reluctantly agrees to give it a try. Okay, these idiots are about to make a very bad decision. I don't care if you're a believer or not, it's common knowledge that you never invite a demon in, especially after the last guy who puked up black slime until he f***ing died. Jack might think that he's in the process of filming the episode of a lifetime, but by the time that this next interview is over, he and everyone else in the studio are going to be in for one hell of a finale. The instant that Lily here came out on stage, the warning signs started to pile up that she genuinely could be possessed by a demonic spirit. The girl's behaviors have been incredibly strange, even before coming to the show, going all the way back to those pictures that they have of her standing on the roof of a hospital like some kind of creepy Batman. Here, she seems oddly disconnected from reality, as if there are two people within herself that are both struggling for control. The camera also glitched as soon as she came out on stage, and Jack noticed that the girl had an extremely strong grip when they shook hands, a telltale sign of demonic possession. She's also somehow able to look straight into the next camera just before the angles switch, as if she can somehow predict which camera they're going to cut to next. But the strangest thing of all is that, for a second there, she 100% spoke in the voice of Jack's dead wife. And if that's not a red flag, then I don't know what is. Plus, we know that demons prefer to latch themselves on to traumatized children. And what could be more traumatic than being born into a death cult that was planning to use you as a sacrifice? The unexplainable phenomena have also made a serious increase since June and Lily here showed up. Poor Gus was damn near electrocuted by that theremin. And when the glasses were breaking, you could even see an image of Maddie's face briefly appear in the mirror on the table. The worst part is that some guy named Steve, who appears to be the camera operator, keeps trying to tell someone about the glitches, but the others are too busy trying to squeeze this episode for all that it's worth to bother paying him any attention. Even Dr. June herself believes that Lily here is possessed by a demon. So I have to ask, what in the world would make her think that it's a good idea to try conjuring up this bad boy live on air? She was fully against doing anything like that just a few minutes ago, but all it took was some peer pressure from Jack and the audience to change her mind. If we really think that there's a demonic spirit controlling Lily, then the last thing that anyone should be doing is calling it out for an interview. What they need to do is get this girl to a priest or a spiritual healer and see if they can't send Mr. Wriggles back to the underworld where he belongs. They could even do it during an episode, and then Jack would be able to go down as the first host in history to successfully exorcise a demonic entity on live TV. Plus, bringing them back for a second appearance would definitely draw in some viewers. It's the classic strategy of leaving the audience on a cliffhanger to make sure that they tune in next week to see how it all played out. They could even have another follow-up interview where they see how the girl is doing after the exorcism. The episodes practically write themselves here. Instead, Jack is so focused on the short term that he's about to put everyone in the studio in danger. And by the time that they realize what they've done, it'll already be way too late. During the commercial break, Gus rushes over to Jack, saying that he's heard what happened to Christo, and is getting worried that they're toying with forces beyond their control. As for Jack, he thinks that they're already in too deep, insisting that they need these ratings to save the jobs of everyone on the show. The cameras roll on set, now enveloped in complete darkness except for a single spotlight on June and Lily. After doing her best to prepare everyone for what they should expect, June begins putting the girl into a hypnotic state, instructing her to close her eyes and let herself fall asleep. Once she's deep in the trance, June asks for Mr. Wriggles to come out and say hello. At first, it seems like nothing's happening, but just then, Lily begins to struggle violently in her chair. as if she's being overcome by some unseen force. The doctor commands the spirit to speak, and as Lily raises her head for the first time, she can see that there's been a clear change in the girl's appearance, her face becoming strangely scarred and distorted, and her voice taking on a deep, undeniably demonic tone. The girl abruptly turns to face Jack, saying that the two of them have met before under the tall trees. When the doctor tries to recenter her focus, the girl flies into an offensive attack where she suggests that the doctor and Jack have been seeing each other, possibly before his wife's death, and warns them both that what happened to Maddie was no coincidence, implying that her illness was the price that Jack had to pay for his fame. Losing control, June pulls back and slaps the girl hard across the face, but when she leans forward to apologize, Lily's face briefly transforms into a demonic scrawl. As she takes a violent chomp at the doctor's hand, June draws a pendant from her shirt, reciting an incantation as she attempts to end the ritual, but it's no use, and the demon only laughs with sick satisfaction. Suddenly, a bolt of blue energy begins to race around the studio, and the chair that Lily's sitting in starts to levitate several feet off of the ground. The girl screams, but then just as suddenly as it began, it seems like Lily is back in control, with Jack cutting to commercial break while they collect their thoughts. Okay, forget cutting to a break. If I were one of the guys working in this studio, then I would have been halfway down the block the instant that Lily here started going full exorcist mode. You can't just tie a kid to a chair on live TV and try to use her as a conduit for the legions of hell. Besides, I'd say that this kid's already been through enough paranormal activity for one lifetime, hasn't she? That's not to mention that they've already had plenty of a heads up that this was not going to end well. Before June and Lily came out, they played a tape from only a few months back where the doctor tried to communicate with the demon for the first time, in broad daylight at 2:30 p.m. I might add. And from the sound of things, it seems like they completely lost control of the situation almost immediately. Sure, having a repeat of that might make for some really compelling television if you manage to survive the encounter, but even if they're somehow able to bring Lily back, knowing that the world saw a live broadcast of her acting like that would seriously be traumatic for the poor kid. And we need to take her welfare into consideration too. Now, there's still a way for both of them to get what they want out of this, which for the doctor is to prove that her work is legit, and for Jack to be the most famous man on TV. And that's by rescheduling this interview to happen again under more controlled conditions. That way, the doctor can have everything set up exactly how she needs to, and Jack can still get his story plus have the added benefit of having time to build hype for the episode to maximize views. And they won't be putting a live studio audience in danger in the process. The problem here was that Dr. June herself set them up for failure. She needed Lily to be completely focused on her, but it was painfully obvious that Lily was focused on everything but her. And before the demonstration even started, she was hardly even speaking to Lily at all. If there were any doubts that the girl is genuinely possessed, I think that we can now safely put those to bed. The camera glitched again when she turned to look at Jack, and this time, an image of his dead wife's face appeared on the back of the girl's head. She also mentioned how they first met in the tall trees, which can only be a reference to some shady shit he did back at the Grove. There's almost no way that Lily herself would know about Jack's past, but access to a hidden knowledge is another telltale sign of demonic possession. And you know what else is too? How about the girl's chair suddenly levitating several feet off the damn ground? The sudden change in her voice, the scars appearing on her face. It's a demon! Case closed. No further evidence required, but now they've just invited this entity onto the set. And now that the door is open, shutting it is going to be a lot more difficult. Dr. June here seems to think that she's the only one in control, but really, it could be the demon that's been playing her all along. She claims to be the expert, but her response to the demon gives away that that's probably not the case. When she was trying to cast it back out of the girl, she took out what appeared to be some kind of Nazar amulet, which originates from the Middle East. But the prayer that she was reciting, Vade Retro Santana, comes from the medieval West. The doctor here is all over the place, and clearly, whatever she was trying didn't work. The demon even seemed to think that it was funny. They're playing with fire here, and with no one around who's actually qualified to deal with this kind of thing, it won't be much longer before they end up getting burned. After the break, Jack starts off by apologizing to the audience for the crazy shit that they've just witnessed, and reassures them that Lily is 100% alright. But that's when Carmichael here decides that he's been quiet for long enough. He insists that everything that happened with Lily, the levitation, the physical changes to her face and all, was nothing but clever showmanship, and says that he's going to prove it. First, he needs a volunteer, and it looks like Gus is on deck. After dimming the lights and making sure that Gus feels comfortable, the Skeptic pulls out a large pocket watch and tells everyone to focus directly on it, including Gus himself, the audience, and the camera for the viewers back home. All of a sudden, Gus says that he's starting to feel itchy, and when he reaches for a cut on his neck from shaving, dozens of earthworms begin appearing from the wound. Terrified, Gus reaches down and tears open his stomach as a pile of blood and worms comes falling out. With the audience in shock, he leans forward as another larger worm suddenly explodes out of his eyeball. But just when it looks like the man is done for, Carmichael releases everyone from the trance, and they're all shocked to see that Gus is completely fine. With that, Carmichael takes his seat back on stage, proudly declaring that his demonstration was a resounding success. He's convinced that this proves without a doubt that June and Lily are just an act, but the doctor maintains that Lily's condition is much more than just smoke and mirrors. To prove it one way or the other, Jack has the producers play back the tape of Gus and Carmichael, and what they see leaves everyone in the studio in a state of shock. On the tape, Carmichael can clearly be heard placing the image of the worms inside of Gus and the audience's heads. And when these worms were supposedly coming out of his body, everyone can clearly see that Gus was unharmed. Still, June insists that she never hypnotized anyone in the studio, and to prove their point, Lily suggests that they should play back the footage of her experience instead. This time, when they play back the tapes, the footage is exactly how they remember it, with no signs of trickery involved at all. Carmichael still refuses to buy it, but suddenly, there's a glitch in the tape, and a concerned Jack orders the producers to play it back frame by frame. Following his instructions, they click through the tape one moment at a time, when, all of a sudden, for a single frame, they see the ghost of Maddie standing right behind them with her hand on Jack's shoulder. The audience watches in stunned silence as Carmichael starts to accuse Jack of pulling some kind of trick to boost his ratings. But from the look on Jack's face, it's painfully obvious that this wasn't meant to be part of the show. Out of nowhere, an aura of blue electricity begins to emit from Lily's body. And when Jack reaches over to help her, all of the lights in the studio surge and go out. When the lights come back, the girl is standing completely upright in the middle of the stage, a bolt of electricity passing through her body from the teleprompter at the front of the set and into the rigging up above. Suddenly, her head splits completely in half down the middle, as supernatural flames begin to pour out of her skull. And the audience and crew take this as their cue to get the absolute out of there while they still can. Terrified, Gus gets to his feet and pulls out a religious neckpiece for protection, but the demon effortlessly snaps his neck completely around so that his head is facing backwards on his shoulders, killing the man instantly. Now it's June who jumps out of her seat, using the medallion from earlier in the night to try to get Lily back under control, but the demon hoists her several feet into the air by the chain, sending Jack flying backwards through the air and slicing June's neck open before anyone can intervene. In a last-ditch effort for his life to be spared, Carmichael swears his allegiance to the demon, and even tries to pay it off with the check that he keeps in his pocket, but the demon only laughs in his face, causing him to burn alive from the inside out. As she turns forward, the camera zooms in directly on Lily, and a demonic face is seen appearing in the static before a card reading station difficulties finally cuts off the broadcast. Okay, and that's the show, folks. Thanks for stopping by, and make sure to tune in next week for more unspeakable horrors beyond human comprehension. That was insane. Well, Jack, it looks like you finally got what you were after, but something tells me that this isn't how you saw it playing out when you were signing your name in blood on the dotted line during one of your demonic camping trips. I'll admit, that was some pretty damn compelling television, but since I can't give you an Emmy, I'll give you this instead. Jack, you f***ed up! This one's special because it's a f*** up that's been in the making for the better part of 2 decades. Little Jack, the radio host from Chicago, got so angry for fame that you decided to get involved with a secret society. and made a pact with the literal devil himself that resulted in the tragic death of the only person who actually loved you, your wife, Maddie, who seemed like a much better person if we're going to keep it real. Going full Jerry Springer with it is one thing, but becoming so obsessed with getting the #1 spot that you literally conjure a demon live on the air is a whole different story. The worst part is that there were so many opportunities to call it a night. Christo suddenly collapsing after inviting the spirits in was one thing. Maybe he just had a headache. But projectile vomiting black slime? I'm sorry, but we're stopping everything right the there. You just had to keep pushing it, didn't you, Jack? Then out comes creepy Lily here, and one of the first things that she did was start speaking in the voice of your dead wife. Not enough? Well, levitating up several feet into the air while shouting more obscenities than an Xbox lobby definitely should have been. That was your cue to wrap the show, call a priest, and consider turning to a life of religion. But now, at least 4 people are dead, with who knows how many more on the way. And it looks like you're about to be trapped in your own personal version of hell, where every night is a rerun of the worst night of your life. Sorry, Jack, but do I even really need to say it again? You up! Suddenly, the show begins to play back from the very beginning as if nothing happened, but Jack can tell right away that something is not right. The audience cackles at him with demonic laughter, and he begins slipping through time, reliving the most famous moments of his show, including his final interview with his dying wife. After several terrifying visions, Jack now finds himself back in the moment where he signed his first major deal, and 2 cult members lead him away to meet with their leader, who forces him to kneel before a studio executive dressed as a giant owl while he drinks from a goblet of unknown liquid. The stage pulls back, and there's Maddie on her deathbed, who says that she knows her death was his sacrifice for fame. Gasping for breath, she begs Jack to end her pain with the sacrificial dagger, but when he does, he sees that he's somehow back in the original studio, with the girl Lily having taken his wife's place. Left speechless by the carnage around him, Jack starts desperately trying to wake himself up, hoping that this was all another trick of his mind, but it's no use. As the camera cuts to black, a message at the bottom of the screen simply reads, "So it is done." And it looks like Jack here has just learned the most important lesson of all. If you're going to make a deal with the devil, make sure that you read the fine print. Okay, boom. That was awesome. I fucking love this movie so much, and it was so much fun to cover it for How to Beat. Let me know what you guys thought down in the comments below. How would you have navigated the spookiest night on television? Don't forget to like and subscribe, and check out that How to Beat playlist for more videos exactly like this one. Stay out of the grove. I'm that guy. We'll see you in the next episode, and have a damn good day.